We continue with the report of our network partner, and one of our main partner is the Federal Agency of Water Management, situated in Betzenkirchen, and Thomas Weninger is here. Thomas, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Erwin. Yes, first of all, the warmest greetings from Peter Strauss, the boss who was originally intended for this short speech here and for the first presentation. He has to be in another place. And therefore, I will give you just a very few words about our recent projects in this framework together with our cooperators, the Land Reform Authority and the Association Landschaft Wasser. We do some projects where the landscape is always in the center, and especially as we are the agency for water management, the water balance, the water cycle in the landscape. And therefore, what is the problem, or the big question is coming to us actually from the bacteria, or I don't know what the society as itself is, if the bacteria are under the farmers, because very often the problem is, let's say, exploding somehow, that we are losing our water resources throughout the year in the agricultural production. And therefore, people are coming and asking, how can we keep the water in the landscape? This is the major headline often. And here I put two pictures from the history of our institution, where in the 50s or 60s, huge area of land in Austria were drained. The water was accelerated very much in the direction of the rivers and the Black Sea actually. And of course now we are realizing that the water is missing, which we are putting away from our fields. And therefore we started to make some research projects where we want to find the answers for this, because just again, a story a few weeks ago, I had the discussion with a farmer. They told us, or they asked us, you scientists, you can produce so many colorful maps, you predict yield losses of 50% and something. Now produce a map or tell us how we can keep the water in the landscape. We need it there, and one possibility of this is to make little retention basins like this one here in different sizes, and this is one of our research goals, to make or to quantify these effects, to find the answer to this. So we want to tell them what is the best way to keep the water in the landscape somehow. And also here we see the landscape structure is something we know that there is an effect, but I think it's very much underestimated how large this effect really is. And there are these structural elements like we saw before, the retention basins, or here even this small field ridge, or how to call it. You see it makes quite a big, or it has a big effect on the water flow here. So there is, yes, it spreads out and the water is getting slower. We hope that it's infiltrating. And yes, we start with this now. We want to get numbers, more and more numbers and information to give a real answer to the question how the water can stay there. And another thing, or another structural element in the landscape, which was also mentioned today a little bit, and which is one of the focus, or where the focus of our research also is, are the hedgerows. You see here two pictures of very water effective hedgerows, but hedgerows not only have an effect on the water cycle or water balance, but they have very much more effects, and ecosystem services are important for the landscape health. Maybe over the top of the soil health there is something like a land health, but it's not yet really came into practice, this term. But that's also my last slide already, because I want to give the word to my wonderful colleague Weninger Dürr, which will tell you something more about, or more in detail about our work about hedgerows. Thank you.
No, it's on. Okay. So, okay, it's going to be a bit hard to coordinate, but we'll get there. Okay, so my part is to present to you the project we are currently working on, which is an indicator-based assessment scheme for ecosystem services of hedgerows called HEC-IN. So, first of all, to get everyone on the same knowledge base, I would like to explain to you very quickly what ecosystem services are. I don't know if everyone knows it. So, ecosystem services just describe the many benefits nature provides to us humans. And since a hedgerow is its own ecosystem, this concept can also be applied for hedgerows. So examples for ecosystem services of hedgerows are, for example, the provision of food, pollination, erosion protection, the cultural heritage, and we also included habitat services for wildlife, such as the food source for animals and fungi, and also the corridor a hedgerow can be to connect different ecosystems with each other. So the main aim of our project is to quantify and evaluate these different ecosystem services, and the calculations we use for that are based on scientific studies and expert judgments. So the goal is an easy application so that the scheme can be used not only by scientists or biologists, but also, for example, as citizen science projects, by farmers, for education, decision makers, and so on. So, how does it work? Here in the graph you can see the ecosystem services we included on the right-hand side. The indicators, excuse me. So, on the left-hand side, there are the ecosystem services. The indicators are on the right-hand side, and the interconnections between these two are the colored lines in the middle. These lines are important because, as you can see, one ecosystem service is fed by more than one indicator, and likewise, one indicator can indicate the quality of more than one ecosystem service of a hedgerow. It was important to us that the indicators are easily detectable, as I already said, meaning we only use GIS information and a one-time visit in the field. So we do not have to analyze stuff in the lab or monitor certain species for a longer period of time. We created, therefore, a recording sheet, which you can see here, not really well, but just, and for each indicator, there are different gradients. There's a little thing. Different gradients that you can choose from. So, for example, For the number of woody species, you can count the number of woody species in a 30-meter part of the hedgerow, and then mark A, B, C, D, or E on your recording sheet. We will have a handbook where everything will be described, so it's more objective. Not like 100% never is possible, but yeah. So these A, B, C, D, E's do not have a value yet, so it's not said that A is better than E or the other way around. This is because of trade-offs. So it is possible that an indicator indicates a well ecosystem service 1, but a poor ecosystem service 2. So the valuation is only made in the next step. So each connection that we saw on the graph I showed you before gets valuated individually. Okay, so these valuations are based on literature and expert judgments, and the values are made from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest score possible. All these relevant indicators are then put together into an equation to a final score per ecosystem service. So in the end, we have 13 scores, one score per ecosystem service. We will have a pi rated chart in the end. I will come to that in a minute. To visualize my saying, I will talk you through 2 examples. Here we have 2 hedgerows. Hedgerow 1 is a well-connected hedgerow between 2 forests. It has a lot of woody species in it, so about 12 per 30 meters. There are no neophytes in it, and a lot of dead wood. It is next to a walkway and has clearance cairns, which is Lesesteinhaufen in German, and many structures and a broad margin. Hedgerow 2, on the other hand, has a rather poor species richness. It is also very well connected between other hedgerows, and has a lot of neophytes in it, especially Robinia pseudacacia, and a high amount of dead wood in it as well. It lacks structural variability other than the dead wood, and has a margin on in a part of the hedge. So here you can see these pi rated charts I just talked about. Each column here is 1 ecosystem service. So we can see that hedgerow 1 delivers all the ecosystem services we applied well to very well, so either 4 or 5. And hedgerow 2 has a much more differentiated picture. With ecosystem services corridor, carbon sequestration, soil protection, and what else? Breeding sites and resting places. A really high score, or a rather high score, and products from the hedge, recreation, tourism, and cultural heritage with a rather low score. Of course, this doesn't mean that the hedgerow is not good enough or whatever. It just depends on the purpose of the hedge as well. But there's definitely potential for improvement. Looking back at the indicators and how they have been scored, it is possible to find out what could be done to improve the hedgerow. For example, if we look at the ecosystem service pollination, we could go back, see that a 5-meter herbaceous margin and more species richness would lead to a better result. So HackIn has the aim to quantify and evaluate different ecosystem services of a hedgerow using valuations and based on scientific studies and expert judgment. To enter the topic or to simply have a broad overview of the hedgerow benefits and how to plan, manage and connect them, I recommend you this this folder we made for the Interact project Symbio, which you find somewhere on your table. And it's available in German and in Czech. Yeah, so I would like to thank you all for your time. And yeah, if there are any questions, I don't know if there's time for questions, but thank you.
Have some questions for Thomas and Alexander?
Was mich besonders Was mich besonders interessiert, wir haben in Holland eine Diskussion, wie man diese Ökosystemleistungen, do it in English, or in Deutsch, how to reward these ecosystem services. There's a discussion that farmers do not get the real services they deliver by delivering their original products like potatoes or cereals. So the market doesn't pay by itself for ecosystem services. And how could we enhance the delivering of ecosystem services by paying them directly to farmers? It seems to me that your method of how to measure, so to speak, the ecosystem services could be a very helpful element. Because if you want to reward the farmers or the foresters for their production of ecosystem services, you should measure them, and you should measure the improvement. That should be the success of their work. So could you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I was fascinated by these two hedgerows and the way you took these two differences, and I thought, could it be a helpful element to reward out of the normal market outcome for direct payments, for instance, in case of the Common Agricultural Policy? Or do I ask too much?
Yeah, microphone. For the moment, maybe you ask too much, but the project itself, or this system was intended, or the main intention was to collect, first of all, the scientific information which is possible and which is available for hedgerows, and then bring it in something like you see here in a communication instrument. But still, it's of course, it's the basis the same, the fundament of knowledge which we try to create there. And to be honest, the question is not really in our everyday life, but we are open for that to get into discussion also with the policy systems persons.
Well, I started this morning by trying to make clear that we should bridge the gap between science and society and farmers. So I wondered whether this study of yours could be helpful for making clear that the ecosystem services are real services. That's one question, huh? Making clear, because many people say, well, our ecosystem services is too vague, but you make that clear, and you make a distinction between the level of ecosystem services that is delivered by different ways of doing it. And that could be a very good basis for the discussion of how to pay for ecosystem services as an element of the income for farmers and foresters. That's what I'm trying to make clear in the mission also, huh? bridge the gap between science and the public, but also the gap between farmers and scientists. But farmers can only exist if they have a reasonable income. That's what they are after. Not have many cows as much as, but they want to have a decent income. And the system now is stimulating more production, more large scale, instead of paying for that what is not rewarded. So continue your good work.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question, thank you very much also. I think it's very important to look at hedgerows and structures in the landscape in this way. But I also know that assessing ecosystem services and the level at which they are delivered, so good or less good, so this is probably not an easy task. And how did you, which kind of methodology did you use? Because you have so many different ecosystem services to address. So as such, they are not easy to compare sometimes. And then you come up with levels of being good and less good, similar to my soil health issues, indicators, and so on. And I know from that it's not so easy sometimes to decide, because it's decision sometimes, what is good, what is not good. Yeah. So on which kind of methodology did you base your work here?
So we tried to, as far as possible, have all of our calculations based on some kind of study, like scientific study. Sometimes there are quite good bases for that. There are also already existing hedgerow valuations, mainly from Great Britain and Ireland. So sometimes we also based our calculations on that. Other than that, yeah, so of course there's this expert judgment thing, which, yeah, I mean, it will be up for discussion, of course, and there's always a place for critique and improvement. We just, yeah, we try to get it somehow on the same, on one level, and yeah. Try to, okay, now it's off again. Try to find.
Are there more questions? Thank you very much.